In the fog-choked shadows of Dartmoor, a monstrous hound stalks Baskerville Hall, its glowing eyes fueling a centuries-old curse. When Sir Henry Baskerville inherits the estate, Dr. John Watson arrives to protect him, uncovering cryptic warnings, sinister signals, and a cloaked watcher on the moor. As Sherlock Holmes emerges from the mist to unravel the plot, the deaths of an escaped convict and a cunning mastermind reveal a chilling truth. A beast, bred for murder, serves a greed-driven scheme to claim the Baskerville legacy. With danger closing in, can Holmes and Watson slay the hound before it claims its final prey? A tale of terror, deception, and deduction unfolds on the haunted moor. Chapter 1. The Visitor at Baker Street. It was one of those crisp October mornings in London, when the air carries a hint of frost, and the fog, though not yet oppressive, lingers like a veil over the city's bustling streets. The clock in our sitting room at 221B Baker Street had just struck 10, and I, Dr. John H. Watson, sat by the fire, my medical journal open but unread, my thoughts drifting to the peculiar absence of activity that had marked our recent days. Sherlock Holmes, my friend and companion, lounged in his armchair, his long fingers steepled before his lips, his grey eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the confines of our modest rooms. The violin lay untouched upon the table, and a pile of unanswered correspondence testified to his current state of ennui, a state I knew to be both dangerous and fleeting. For Holmes's mind, like a finely tuned engine, required constant fuel. In the form of intellectual challenge, the silence was broken by the sharp rap of Mrs. Hudson's knock, followed by her voice, tinged with the faintest note of exasperation. "A gentleman to see you, Mr. Holmes," she announced, ushering in a visitor whose appearance immediately piqued my curiosity. He was a tall, lean man, perhaps in his early 40s, with a scholarly stoop to his shoulders and a face that bore the marks of both intellect and anxiety. His attire was that of a country practitioner, well worn but meticulously kept, with a tweed coat and a pair of spectacles perched precariously on his nose. In his hand he clutched a stout walking stick, its silver band glinting in the firelight. "Dr. James Mortimer, I presume," said Holmes, rising with a languor that belied the sudden spark in his eyes. "Your stick, left behind during your visit last week, has told me much, though I confess I expected you sooner." The visitor started, his gaze darting to the stick, which now rested against the wall near Holmes's desk. "You have it still, then," he said, his voice a curious blend of relief and apprehension. "I had not thought to reclaim it, but rather to seek your counsel on a matter of far greater urgency." Holmes gestured to a chair, and as Dr. Mortimer seated himself, I observed the man more closely. His hands trembled slightly, not with fear, I thought, but with the weight of some unspoken burden. His eyes, magnified by his spectacles, were keen, yet troubled, and his brow was furrowed as though wrestling with a problem too complex for ordinary minds. I glanced at Holmes, whose expression remained inscrutable, though I knew from the slight tilt of his head that he was already cataloguing every detail of our guest. "You are a medical man," Holmes began, his tone conversational yet precise, "practicing in Devonshire, if I am not mistaken. The inscription on your stick, to James Mortimer, MRCS, from his friends of the CCH, 1884, suggests a connection to the Charing Cross Hospital, though you have long since left London for the country. The wear on the sticks, Pharrell, indicates frequent use over rough terrain, and the faint scent of dog upon your coat tells me you are fond of canine companions. Likely a spaniel, given the hairs I observe." Dr. Mortimer's jaw dropped, and for a moment He seemed at a loss for words. "Extraordinary," he murmured at last. "You are precisely correct, Mr. Holmes. I am indeed a practitioner in Grimpen, a village on the edge of Dartmoor, and I do keep a spaniel, though how you divined it from a mere stick is beyond me." Holmes waved a hand dismissively. "A trifle, Dr. Mortimer. The stick is a faithful chronicler of its owner's habits, provided one knows how to read it. But I suspect you have not come to discuss such trifles. Pray, state your business, for I see in your manner a matter of some gravity." Dr. Mortimer adjusted his spectacles and drew from his pocket a folded manuscript, its edges yellowed and curling, as though it had been handled many times. "I am here," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "concerning the death of Sir Charles Baskerville, my friend and patient, and the danger that now threatens his heir, Sir Henry. But to understand the matter fully, you must first hear the legend of the Baskerville curse." He unfolded the manuscript with care, and I leaned forward, my curiosity fully engaged. The document was written in a spidery, antiquated hand, and Dr. Mortimer began to read, his voice steady but tinged with a solemnity that seemed to draw the very light from the room. "In the time of the Great Rebellion," he began, "the manor of Baskerville was held by Hugo Baskerville, a man of profane and cruel disposition, whose name became a byword for debauchery in the West Country. It was said that Hugo, inflamed by drink and desire, pursued a yeoman's daughter across the moor, intent on her ruin. She fled into the night, and Hugo, with his dissolute companions, gave chase, vowing to capture her. But the moor, wild and treacherous, was no friend to such men. The girl was found dead, her heart broken by terror and exhaustion, and beside her lay Hugo Baskerville, his throat torn out, while over him stood a hound beast of monstrous size, its jaws dripping with blood, its eyes aglow with a hellish fire. From that day, the curse of the Baskerville hound was born, and it is said to haunt the heirs of the family, bringing death to those who venture upon the moor at night." Dr. Mortimer paused, his eyes searching Holmes's face for a reaction. My friend, however, remained impassive, though I noted the faintest tightening of his lips, a sign that his mind was already at work. "A quaint tale," he remarked, "but surely you, a man of science, do not place credence in such legends." "Not in the supernatural, Mr. Holmes," Dr. Mortimer replied earnestly, "but in the evidence of my own senses. Sir Charles Baskerville, a man of delicate constitution but sound mind, was found dead 3 months ago on the grounds of Baskerville. Whole, his face bore an expression of such horror that I, who knew him well, scarcely recognized him. Near his body were the tracks of a hound, large, unnaturally sown, though the coroner attributed his death to heart failure. I cannot dismiss the possibility that fear, induced by some tangible terror, was the true cause. I felt a chill, despite the fire crackling beside me. The image of a spectral hound, its eyes burning in the darkness, was vivid enough to unsettle even a rational mind. Holmes, however, leaned forward, his interest now unmistakable. "You mentioned an heir," he said. "Tell me of this, Sir Henry." Dr. Mortimer nodded. "Sir Henry Baskerville, the last of the direct line, has been living in Canada, where he has made a modest fortune in farming. He is due to arrive in London tomorrow to claim his inheritance, Baskerville Hall and its estate, one of the largest in Devonshire. But I fear for his safety, Mr. Holmes. The legend, whether true or not, has a power of its own, and there are those who might exploit it. I have received a warning, anonymous and brief, which I believe you should see." From his pocket he produced a A small envelope, its surface smudged, as though handled in haste. He handed it to Holmes, who extracted a single sheet of paper. The message was crude, its words cut from a newspaper and pasted haphazardly. As you value your life or your reason, keep away from the moor. Holmes held the paper to the light, his eyes narrowing as he examined the typeface and adhesive. Times Leader, yesterday's edition, he murmured. The sender is no fool. He has taken care to disguise his hand. But the urgency suggests knowledge, perhaps of a specific threat. Tell me, Dr. Mortimer, have there been other incidents? The doctor hesitated, then recounted a series of events that had troubled him since Sir Charles's death. The villagers of Grimpen spoke of strange lights on the moor, and some claimed to have heard a low, unearthly howl in the night. Baskerville Hall itself had not been spared. Servants reported footsteps in empty corridors, and Sir Charles, in his final weeks, had grown increasingly agitated, refusing to walk the grounds after dusk. Dr. Mortimer, though a man of reason, admitted that these occurrences had shaken his confidence. I am no believer in ghosts, Mr. Holmes, he said, but I cannot ignore what I have seen and heard. Sir Henry is a practical man, but he is young, and the weight of this legacy may overwhelm him. Holmes leaned back, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. Your narrative is compelling, Dr. Mortimer, he said, but it lacks precision. Let us consider the facts. A man dies, possibly of fright. A legend speaks of a hound. A warning threatens the air. These are threads, but they do not yet form a pattern. I must see Sir Henry and judge his character for myself. Can you arrange a meeting tomorrow? Dr. Mortimer agreed eagerly, promising to bring Sir Henry to Baker Street at 11. As he rose to leave, he hesitated, his hand lingering on the manuscript. There is one more thing, he said. Sir Charles, in his will, entrusted me with a duty, not only as his physician, but as his friend. He believed the curse was real, Mr. Holmes, and he charged me with protecting his nephew. I place that trust in you now. Holmes inclined his head, a gesture that conveyed both acceptance and dismissal. You have done well to come to me, he said. Leave the manuscript and the warning, and return with Sir Henry tomorrow. We shall see what light can be shed upon this shadow. Dr. Mortimer departed, his stick now reclaimed, though I suspected it was the least of his concerns. The door had scarcely closed when Holmes sprang to his feet, his lethargy banished. He seized the warning note and held it to the window, his magnifying glass tracing every contour of the paper. A curious case, Watson, he said, his voice vibrant with excitement. Superstition, murder, and a touch of melodrama, what more could one ask for? I watched as he turned to his chemical table, where a series of test tubes and burners awaited his experiments. You believe there is murder here? I asked, my mind still grappling with the tale of the hound. Belief is irrelevant, Holmes replied, his eyes gleaming. The facts suggest a deliberate act, though whether the agent is man or beast remains to be seen. The warning is our first clue. It implies knowledge, intent, and perhaps fear. We shall begin with the newspaper from which these words were cut. A small matter, but every chain has its weakest link. For the next hour, Holmes was a whirlwind of activity, cross-referencing the note's typeface with a stack of recent newspapers he kept in a corner of the room. I, meanwhile, attempted to resume my reading, but the image of the hound, its jaws dripping, its eyes aflame, haunted my thoughts. I had seen Holmes unravel mysteries before, from the mundane to the macabre, but this case, with its blend of Rural legend and urban menace felt different. The moor, though distant, seemed to cast its shadow even here, in the heart of London. As the afternoon waned, Holmes paused, his gaze fixed on a copy of the Times. "Here it is," he said, tapping the page. The leader article, word for word. Our correspondent is no idle scribbler. He chose his source with care. But why the Times? Why not a less conspicuous paper? There is deliberation here, Watson, and deliberation implies purpose, I ventured. A question. Could it be a prank, Holmes? Some local mischief maker exploiting the legend? He shook his head. A prankster does not take such pains to conceal his identity. No, this is the work of a mind that fears detection. The question is whether that fear stems from guilt or caution. Tomorrow's meeting with Sir Henry will tell us more. The evening passed in relative quiet, though Holmes's restlessness was palpable. He took up his violin, drawing from it a series of plaintive notes that seemed to echo the desolation of the moor. I retired early, my dreams troubled by visions of a vast fog-shrouded landscape and the distant howl of a beast. When I awoke, the fire had died, and Holmes was still at his desk, surrounded by papers and chemical apparatus. "Sleep, Watson," he said, without looking up, "for tomorrow we meet the heir, and the game will truly begin." The next morning, as the clock neared 11, Mrs. Hudson announced the arrival of Dr. Mortimer and Sir Henry Baskerville. The latter was a striking figure, broad-shouldered, with a ruddy complexion and a frank, open manner that spoke of his colonial upbringing. His eyes, however, betrayed a flicker of unease, as though he sensed the weight of the legacy he was about to inherit. Dr. Mortimer, by contrast, seemed more composed than the previous day, though his fingers still clutched the handle of his stick with a nervous intensity. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," Sir Henry began, his voice carrying a faint transatlantic drawl. "I've heard you're the man to see when things get queer. Dr. Mortimer's told me about this hound business, and I'll be damned if I let some old ghost story scare me off my own land." But this note, he produced a duplicate of the warning, its words identical to those Dr. Mortimer had shown us. "It came to my Hotel Tan hotel this morning. I want to know what you make of it." Holmes examined the note briefly, then handed it back. "A curious document, Sir Henry. Tell me, have there been any other incidents since your arrival in London, sir?" Henry frowned. "Well, there's the matter of my boot. I left a pair outside my hotel room last night, and one's gone missing. Old worn-out thing, I'd barely miss it, except it's odd. Who steals one boot?" Holmes's eyes sharpened. "Indeed. And where was this boot left?" "Outside my door, for polishing. The hotel staff swear they didn't take it, but it's gone all the same." Dr. Mortimer interjected, his voice tense. "This is precisely the sort of thing I feared. Sir Charles was plagued by small disturbances before his death, misplaced items, strange noises. It is as if the curse follows the family." Holmes raised a hand, silencing him. "Let us dispense with talk of curses for the moment. Sir Henry, describe your journey to London. Any unusual encounters?" Sir Henry recounted his travels, mentioning a bearded man who had seemed to watch him at the docks, though he could not be certain. Holmes listened intently, his questions probing yet measured. "You will remain in London tonight?" he asked. "Yes, at the Northumberland Hotel," Sir Henry replied. "I head to Devonshire tomorrow." Holmes nodded. "Good. I shall require time to consider this matter. Dr. Watson will accompany you to Baskerville Hall, as I have business here that cannot wait. You will report to me daily, Watson, with every detail, however trivial. I started, surprised by this sudden assignment, but Holmes's expression brooked no argument. Sir Henry, too, seemed taken aback, but agreed readily, his trust in Holmes evident. Dr. Mortimer, however, looked troubled. "You will not come yourself, Mr. Holmes?" "Not yet," Holmes replied, his tone enigmatic. "The moor has its secrets, and I prefer to approach them from a distance at first. Watson is my eyes and ears. There is no better man for the task." With that, the interview concluded, and our visitors departed. Holmes turned to me, his face alight with purpose. "Pack your bags, Watson," he said. "You are bound for Dartmoor, and I for the library. This case promises to be a singular one." As I prepared for the journey, I could not shake the feeling that we stood on the threshold of a darkness deeper than any we had faced before. The hound, whether real or imagined, was a shadow that loomed large, and I knew that Holmes alone could bring light to its mystery. Chapter 2. The Curse of the Baskervilles. The morning following Dr. James Mortimer's visit to our rooms at 2-1B Baker Street found me in a state of restless anticipation. The fire crackled fitfully in the grate, casting long shadows across the familiar clutter of Sherlock Holmes's quarters books strewn across the table, chemical apparatus gleaming in the corner, and the faint aroma of tobacco lingering in the air. Holmes himself was absent, having departed at dawn with a cryptic remark about necessary inquiries. I knew better than to question his methods, for his mind, once engaged, moved with a precision that brooked no interruption. Yet the tale of the Baskerville hound, with its blend of rustic superstition and grim reality, had taken hold of my imagination, and I found myself pacing the room, awaiting the arrival of Sir Henry Baskerville. At precisely 11, the doorbell rang, and Mrs. Hudson ushered in our visitors. Dr. Mortimer entered first. His lean frame stooped as though still burdened by the weight of his narrative. Behind him came Sir Henry Baskerville, a man whose appearance was as striking as his circumstances. He was of medium height, broad-shouldered, with a ruddy complexion that spoke of open fields and a life spent under the Canadian sun. His eyes, a clear hazel, held a spark of determination, though I detected in them a flicker of unease, as if he sensed the shadow cast by his inheritance. His attire tailored but practical marked him as a man of action. Yet his manner was courteous, tinged with a directness that contrasted with the reticence of his companion, Mr. Holmes. "Dr. Watson," Sir Henry began, his voice carrying a faint transatlantic cadence, "I'm told you're the men to see when a fellow's in a fix. Dr. Mortimer's filled me in on this hound business, and I'll be plain, I don't hold with ghosts or curses, but I'm not fool enough to ignore a threat. This letter I got this morning's got me wondering what I've stepped into." He drew from his pocket an envelope, its surface creased as though handled in haste, and handed it to me. I passed it to Holmes's empty chair, noting the absence of my friend with a pang of irritation. "Holmes will return shortly," I said, striving to keep my tone steady. "In the meantime, Sir Henry, pray tell us of this letter and any other incidents that may bear upon your case." Dr. Mortimer adjusted his spectacles, his fingers betraying a nervous energy. "If I may, Dr. Watson, I should like to provide some context. Sir Henry arrived in London only yesterday, and already there have been peculiarities. The letter is but one. The matter of the boot is another." "Boot?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. Sir Henry nodded, his brow furrowing. "A small thing, maybe, but odd. I left a pair of boots outside my hotel room last night for polishing, one new, one old. This morning, the old one's gone, vanished. The hotel staff swear they know nothing about it, and I'm inclined to believe them. It's not the sort of thing a man steals for profit. I made a mental note of this, recalling Holmes's interest in such details. And the letter, I prompted. Sir Henry handed me the envelope, and I opened it to find a single sheet of paper bearing a message composed of words cut from a newspaper. As you value your life or your reason, keep away from the moor. The letters were unevenly pasted, the adhesive smudged, suggesting haste or agitation. I examined the paper closely, noting its cheap quality and the faint watermark of a common stationer. "This came to your hotel this morning?" I asked. "Yes," Sir Henry replied. "Delivered by hand," the porter said. "But no one saw the messenger. I'd have thought it a prank, but after Mortimer's talk of hounds and curses, I'm not so sure." Dr. Mortimer leaned forward, his voice low. "Sir Henry is too practical a man to be swayed by superstition, Dr. Watson, but I fear the legend of the Baskerville hound carries a weight that cannot be easily dismissed. Sir Charles, his uncle, was a man of science, yet he believed in the curse, and it haunted his final days. I feel it my duty to ensure Sir Henry does not meet the same fate." Before I could respond, the door swung open, and Holmes entered, his tall, lean figure moving with the quiet energy of a man who has been abroad on urgent business. His eyes, sharp and grey, took in the scene at a glance, and a faint smile curved his lips as he noted Sir Henry's presence. "My apologies for my tardiness," he said, settling into his chair. "I have been pursuing a small matter at the British Museum, but I am now entirely at your service. Watson, you have the letter." I handed it to him, and he examined it with the intensity of a jeweler inspecting a rare gem. "Times Leader, yesterday's edition," he murmured, holding the paper to the light. The sender has taken pains to conceal his hand, but the choice of newspaper is revealing. The Times is not the reading of the common man. We are dealing with someone educated, perhaps cautious, but not without resources. Sir Henry raised an eyebrow. "You can tell all that from a scrap of paper." Holmes's smile widened. "Paper, Sir Henry, is a canvas of human intent. The typeface, the adhesive, the very creases speak volumes to those who listen. But let us hear your story. Dr. Mortimer has given me the bones of it, but I require the flesh." Sir Henry recounted his journey from Canada, his arrival at the Northumberland Hotel, and the curious theft of his boot. He spoke with the frankness of a man unaccustomed to guile, describing his intention to take up residence at Baskerville Hall and modernize the estate. "I have no patience for old tales of hounds," he said, "but I won't deny this letter's got me rattled. And Mortimer's story about my uncle, well, it's enough to make a man think twice." Holmes turned to Dr. Mortimer. "You mentioned the legend yesterday, but I would hear it again, with any details you omitted. Leave nothing out, for what seems trivial to you may be vital to me." Dr. Mortimer produced the same yellowed manuscript, its pages worn from frequent handling. He cleared his throat and began to read, his voice steady but imbued with a gravity that seemed to draw the warmth from the room. The tale was much as he had recounted it. Hugo Baskerville, a profligate of the 17th century, had pursued a maiden across the moor, only to meet a gruesome end at the jaws of a spectral hound. The creature, vast and black, with eyes like burning coals, had since haunted the family, striking down those who ventured onto the moor at night. Sir Charles, the manuscript noted, had been particularly troubled by the legend, avoiding the grounds after dusk and speaking often of a curse that seemed to follow his line. When Dr. Mortimer finished, Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled before his lips. "A vivid tale," he remarked, "but let us strip it of its Gothic trappings. Sir Charles died of heart failure, you say, yet his face bore signs of extreme terror. Were there other marks upon the body?" Dr. Mortimer hesitated. "None, save for a slight abrasion on his hand, as if he had fallen or grasped something in his final moments. But the tracks near his body, those of a hound, large and deep, were unmistakable. I measured them myself." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "And these tracks, did they approach or recede from the body?" "They led away," Dr. Mortimer replied, "toward the moor, as if the creature had fled after its work was done." I felt a chill, despite the fire's warmth. The image of a hound, its purpose fulfilled, vanishing into the fog, was vivid enough to unsettle even a skeptic. Holmes, however, remained unmoved, his expression one of intense concentration. "And you, Sir Henry," he said, turning to the baronet, "have you noticed any other signs of pursuit or observation since your arrival?" Sir Henry frowned, considering. "There was a fellow at the docks when I landed, the bearded man, loitering near the customs house. I thought he was watching me, but he was gone before I could be sure. Could be nothing, but it stuck with me." Holmes nodded, filing the detail away. "Very good. Now, Dr. Mortimer, tell me of Baskerville Hall and its surroundings, the moor, the village, the neighbors, every particular." Dr. Mortimer described the estate in detail, a sprawling, ancient manor, its stone walls, weathered by centuries of wind and rain, set against the wild expanse of Dartmoor. The village of Grimpen, a mile distant, was a cluster of modest cottages, with a single inn and a church whose bell tolled mournfully across the moor. The nearest neighbors were the Stapletons, a brother and sister living at Merripet House, 2 miles from the Hall. Jack Stapleton, a naturalist, was known for his studies of the moor's flora and fauna, while his sister Beryl was said to be a woman of uncommon beauty. Dr. Mortimer spoke of them with respect, though I noted a slight hesitation in his tone, as if he withheld some judgment. "The moor itself," Dr. Mortimer continued, "is a place of singular character. Its bogs are treacherous. Grimpen Mire, in particular, has claimed more than one unwary traveller. The tors rise like sentinels, and the stone huts of ancient tribes. The landscape, relics of a forgotten age. It is a place that breeds superstition, Mr. Holmes, and I confess it has worked upon my own nerves." Holmes listened in silence, his eyes half closed, as though visualizing the scene. When Dr. Mortimer finished, he rose and paced the room, his movements swift and precise. "A fascinating picture," he said at last. "The moor, the manor, the legend, all elements in a drama that is yet to unfold. Sir Henry, you intend to take up residence at the Hall?" "I do," Sir Henry replied firmly. "It's my birthright, and I'll not be scared off by ghost stories or stolen boots. But I'd be glad of your advice, Mr. Holmes." Holmes paused, his gaze fixed on the window, where the fog pressed against the panes like a living thing. "My advice, for the moment, is caution. You will go to Devonshire, but you will not go alone. Watson, I trust you are prepared to accompany." "Sir Henry," I started, caught off guard by the sudden assignment. "Of course, Holmes," I said, though my mind raced with questions. "But will you not come with us?" "Not yet," he replied, his tone enigmatic. "I have inquiries to pursue here, threads that lead back to London, perhaps to the docks where Sir Henry was observed." Watson, you will be my eyes and ears at Baskerville Hall. Observe everything, however trivial, and report to me daily. Dr. Mortimer, you will ensure Sir Henry's safe arrival and provide any further details as they arise." Dr. Mortimer nodded, though his expression remained troubled. Sir Henry, by contrast, seemed heartened by Holmes's decisiveness. "I'm in your hands, Mr. Holmes," he said. "If there's a hound or a man behind this, I want to know it." Holmes dismissed them with a wave, promising to send further instructions. As the door closed behind them, he turned to me, his face alight with the thrill of the chase. "A singular case, Watson," he said, seizing the letter once more. "The hound may be a myth, but the threat is real. The stolen boot, the warning, the bearded man at the dockstees are pieces of a puzzle, and I mean to fit them together." For the remainder of the day, Holmes was a whirlwind of activity. He dispatched a telegram to the Northumberland Hotel, requesting details of their staff and visitors, and sent a boy to scour the newsstands for copies of yesterday's Times. I watched as he examined the letter under his magnifying glass, noting the texture of the paper, the scent of the adhesive, and the precise cuts of the words. "This is no idle prank," he said at last. "The sender knows of Sir Henry's movements and fears his arrival. But why? That is the question." As evening fell, Holmes took up his violin, drawing from it a series of low, mournful notes that seemed to echo the desolation of the moor. I retired to my room, my thoughts consumed by the mystery. The hound, whether real or imagined, was a spectre that loomed large, and I felt the weight of my responsibility to Sir Henry. Yet I trusted Holmes's genius, knowing that even the darkest shadows would yield to his relentless logic. The next morning, as I packed for Devonshire, Holmes handed me a small notebook. "Record everything, Watson," he said. "The moor is a stage, and every player has a part. We shall see who pulls the strings." With that, I prepared to leave, the letters, words echoing in my mind. "Keep away from the moor." I could only hope that Holmes's intellect would prove stronger than the forces arrayed against us. Chapter 3. The problem takes shape. The fog that had clung to London like a shroud began to lift as the afternoon sun cast its pale light through the windows of 2-1B, Baker Street. Sherlock Holmes sat in his armchair, his long fingers steepled before his lips, his eyes fixed on some invisible point where the threads of the Baskerville mystery converged. I, Dr. John H. Watson, stood by the fireplace, my thoughts a tumult of the previous day's revelations, the spectral hound, the cryptic warning, and the curious theft of Sir Henry Baskerville's boot. The air in our rooms was heavy with the scent of Holmes's shag tobacco, and the faint ticking of the mantel clock marked the hours since Sir Henry and Dr. James Mortimer had departed, leaving us to ponder the enigma they had brought. Holmes broke the silence with a suddenness that startled me. "Watson," he said, his voice sharp with purpose, "you are a man of action, and I rely upon your steadiness in the field. This Baskerville affair is no mere ghost story. It has the makings of a deliberate plot, and I mean to unravel it. But first, we must clarify the problem. Sit, and let us reason together." I took my accustomed chair, grateful for the opportunity to order my thoughts. "The facts, as I see them," I began, "are these. Sir Charles Baskerville died of heart failure, his face contorted with terror, near tracks suggesting a large hound. Sir Henry, his heir, receives a warning to avoid the moor, and one of his boots is stolen from his hotel. A bearded man, possibly suspicious, was seen watching him at the docks. Dr. Mortimer believes the family curse may be real, though he is a man of science. There is also the matter of the moor itself, wild, treacherous place that seems to breed fear. Holmes nodded, his eyes gleaming with approval. A fair summary, Watson, though you omit the human element, which is always the crux. The hound, whether real or imagined, is a tool. Its purpose is to terrify, perhaps to kill. The warning letter, cut from the Times, suggests a mind educated yet cautious, fearful of detection. The stolen boot is the most intriguing. A single item, old and worn, taken not for value but for some specific use. And this bearded man at the docks' presence implies surveillance, perhaps connected to the letter's sender. These are not random events, but pieces of a design. He rose and paced the room, his lean frame casting a restless shadow. Consider the sequence, he continued. Sir Charles dies under mysterious circumstances, and within days of Sir Henry's arrival, he is warned and followed. The boot's theft suggests a plan already in motion, one that hinges on scent or identity. We are dealing with an adversary who knows the Baskerville history and seeks to exploit it. The question is, to what end? I ventured a hypothesis. Could it be a matter of inheritance? The Baskerville estate is vast, and Sir Henry's death would leave it open to claimants, perhaps a distant relative or a rival. Holmes paused, his gaze piercing. A plausible theory, Watson, and one we shall test. But inheritance alone is too crude a motive for such theatrics. The hound, the warning, the tracks, these are the work of a mind that delights in fear as much as gain. We must look to the moor itself for answers, for it is the stage on which this drama plays. He crossed to his desk, where a map of Devonshire lay spread, its edges curling from frequent use. Dartmoor, he murmured, tracing a finger across the contours of tors and bogs. A place of isolation, where secrets fester like the mists. Baskerville Hall, here, stands near Grimpen, with Merripit House and the Stapletons nearby. Dr. Mortimer mentioned a Grimpen. Was it? A natural trap for the unwary. If I were to devise a murder, Watson, I could ask for no better setting. His words sent a chill through me, for the image of the moor, vast and desolate, was vivid in my mind. You suspect murder, then? I asked. Not merely an accident or a weak heart. Holmes's lips curved in a faint smile. Suspicion is not proof, but the facts point to human agency. Sir Charles's terror, the hound's tracks, the warning to Sir Henry, these are not the work of chance. Someone or something drove Sir Charles to his death, and that same force now threatens his heir. Our task is to identify it before it strikes again. He returned to his chair, lighting his pipe with a deliberation that belied the intensity of his thoughts. I shall remain in London for the present, he said, for there are inquiries to be made. Here the docks, the hotel, the source of that letter. You, Watson, will accompany Sir Henry to Baskerville Hall. Your role is to observe, to report, and to protect. Trust no one, not even Dr. Mortimer, for his loyalty to Sir Charles may cloud his judgment. Every detail, however small, must reach me. A footprint, a glance, a whispered rumor, these may hold the key. I felt the weight of this responsibility, yet the prospect of action stirred me. I shall do my best, Holmes, I said. But what of you? What inquiries will you pursue? He waved a hand dismissively. The less you know, the better, for ignorance will sharpen your observations. Suffice it to say, I shall be tracing the threads that lead from London to Dartmoor. The bearded man, the newspaper, the hotel staff. These are points of attack. I have already wired the Northumberland Hotel for a list of their porters and guests, and I shall visit the docks myself to seek this mysterious watcher. A knock at the door interrupted us, and Mrs. Hudson entered, bearing a telegram. Holmes tore it open, his eyes scanning the contents with a speed that never ceased to amaze me. From the hotel, he said, no trace of the boot, and the porter confirms the letter was delivered by a boy who vanished into the crowd. A dead end, for now, but it confirms our adversary's cunning. He tossed the telegram aside and resumed his pacing. Time is our enemy, Watson. Sir Henry departs for Devonshire tomorrow, and with him goes the bait for whatever trap is being set. You must be vigilant. The moor is no place for complacencies. Bogs and mists are as dangerous as any human foe. I nodded, my mind already turning to the journey ahead. What should I look for, Holmes? Beyond the obvious, I mean. Everything, he replied, his voice low and intense. The servants at the Holborough Moor and his wife, are they loyal, or do they harbour secrets? The Stapletons, why does a naturalist choose such a remote home? The villagers, do they speak of the hound with fear or skepticism? And the moor itself, its paths, its sounds, its shadows. Note them all, Watson, for the truth lies in the details. As evening approached, Holmes grew silent, his thoughts retreating to that inner realm where he wrestled with problems beyond ordinary comprehension. I spent the remainder of the day preparing for my departure, packing a modest valise with essentials, and ensuring my revolver was in good order. The thought of the moor, with its tales of spectral hounds and hidden dangers, weighed heavily on me, but Holmes's confidence was a bulwark against doubt. That night, as I sat by the fire, Holmes took up his violin, drawing from it a series of slow, mournful notes that seemed to echo the desolation of the landscape we were about to enter. The hound is a symbol, Watson, he said suddenly, his bow pausing mid-stroke. It represents fear, fear of the past, of the unknown, of retribution. Our task is to strip it of its power, to reveal the hand that wields it. I retired to my room, my dreams troubled by visions of a vast, fog-shrouded expanse where unseen eyes watched from the shadows. The next morning, I rose early, my resolve strengthened by the knowledge that Holmes's intellect was at work behind the scenes. As I prepared to meet Sir Henry at the station, a boy delivered a note from Holmes, written in his precise hand. Trust your instincts, Watson, but verify your observations. The moor will test you, but you are equal to it. S.H. The journey to Paddington Station was a blur of London's clamour, its streets alive with the clatter of hansoms and the cries of newsboys. Sir Henry awaited me on the platform, his robust figure unmistakable among the crowd. Dr. Mortimer was with him, his face pale but composed, his stick tapping nervously against the ground. Dr. Watson, Sir Henry greeted me, his handshake firm. I'm glad you're coming along. I don't mind admitting this business has me on edge. Dr. Mortimer nodded. I shall accompany you to the hall, he said, and ensure you are settled. Mr. Holmes's absence troubles me, but I trust his judgment. We boarded the train, its whistle piercing the morning air as we steamed westward. The landscape changed gradually, the city's grey sprawl giving way to rolling fields and, at last, the rugged outline of Dartmoor. Sir Henry gazed out the window, his expression a mix of determination and apprehension. It's a wild place, he said, but I've faced worse in Canada. Still, that letter keeps nagging at me. I reassured him as best I could, though my own thoughts were occupied by Holmes's instructions. The train rattled on, carrying us toward a mystery that seemed to grow darker with every mile. As we neared our destination, the sky grew overcast, and a faint mist began to gather, cloaking the moor in an eerie silence. At Grimpen Station, a small windswept platform greeted us, its single lamp flickering against the gathering dusk. A carriage awaited, driven by a taciturn man who introduced himself as Perkins, the hall's groom. The road to Baskerville Hall wound through a landscape of stark beautitours, rising like ancient sentinels, their outlines blurred by the mist, and patches of bog that gleamed wetly in the fading light. Sir Henry was silent, his eyes fixed on the horizon, while Dr. Mortimer pointed out landmarks with a forced cheerfulness that did little to dispel the gloom. Baskerville Hall loomed into view, its grey stone walls rising from the moor like a fortress of the past. Its windows, narrow and deep-set, seemed to watch our approach with an almost sentient wariness. Barrymore, the butler, stood at the entrance, a tall, gaunt figure with a face as impassive as the stone behind him. His wife, a plump woman with anxious eyes, curtsied as we entered, her hands twisting in her apron. "Welcome, Sir Henry," Barrymore said, his voice deep and measured. "The hall is ready for you, though it's a somber place for a new master." Sir Henry managed a smile. "It'll do," he said, "though I'll be damned if I let it stay so gloomy. Come, Watson, let's see what we're dealing with." The interior was as forbidding as the exterior: high ceilings, dark paneling, and portraits of long-dead Baskervilles staring down with stern disapproval. A fire burned in the great hall, but its warmth seemed swallowed by the vastness of the space. As we settled in, I caught a faint sound, a low, mournful sob, echoing from somewhere deep within the house. Mrs. Barrymore started, her face paling, but she quickly excused it as the wind. That night, as I lay in my room, the moor's silence pressed against the windows, broken only by the occasional cry of a night bird. I wrote my first report to Holmes, detailing our arrival, the hall's oppressive atmosphere, and the curious sob. As I sealed the letter, I felt the weight of my task alone, save for Sir Henry and Dr. Mortimer, in a place where shadows seemed to move of their own accord. The moor stretched beyond, vast and unknowable, and I knew that somewhere within its mists lay the truth of the Baskerville curse. Whether it was a hound, a man, or something darker still, I was determined to face it, armed with Holmes's trust and my own resolve. Chapter 4: Arrival at Baskerville Hall. The train journey from London to Devonshire had been a study in contrasts, the bustling energy of the city giving way to the quiet expanse of the countryside, where hedgerows and rolling hills gradually surrendered to the stark, untamed beauty of Dartmoor. I, Dr. John H. Watson, sat opposite Sir Henry Baskerville, whose robust frame seemed at odds with the faint unease that flickered in his hazel eyes. Dr. James Mortimer, our companion, was silent, his gaze fixed on the passing landscape, his fingers drumming absently on the handle of his walking stick. The weight of Sherlock Holmes's instructions pressed upon me to observe, to report, to protect hand as the train rattled westward. I felt the shadow of the Baskerville curse grow ever darker. We alighted at Grimpen Station as dusk settled. Over the moor, the platform a lonely outpost in a sea of heather and gorse. The air was sharp with the scent of damp earth, and a thin mist curled about the station's single lamp, casting eerie halos in the fading light. Perkins, the groom from Baskerville Hall, awaited us with a dog-cart, his weathered face impassive. As he loaded our luggage, Sir Henry, ever the man of action, clapped him on the shoulder with a forced cheerfulness. "A fine evening for a new start, eh, Perkins?" he said, though his voice carried a note of strain. The groom grunted, his eyes darting to the horizon. "The moor's no place for fine evenings, sir," he replied, his tone clipped. "Best keep to the paths after dark." The road to Baskerville Hall wound through a landscape that seemed to defy human mastery. Tors loomed like ancient giants, their granite faces carved by centuries of wind and rain, while patches of bog gleamed wetly in the twilight, their surfaces deceptively smooth. The silence was profound, broken only by the creak of the cart's wheels and the occasional cry of a curlew. Dr. Mortimer pointed out landmarks, a distant standing stone, the faint outline of a prehistoric hut, but his voice lacked conviction, as if the moor's vastness subdued even his scholarly enthusiasm. As we crested a rise, Baskerville Hall came into view, its silhouette stark against the darkening sky. The manor was a fortress of grey stone, its towers and battlements relics of a feudal past, its windows narrow and deep-set, like eyes wary of the world beyond. A chill ran through me, not from the evening air, but from the sense of isolation that enveloped the place. Sir Henry, however, squared his shoulders, his jaw set with determination. "It's mine, by God," he murmured, "and I'll make it a home yet." We were met at the entrance by Barrymore, the butler, a tall, gaunt man with a face as stern as the hall itself. His black coat and formal bearing contrasted oddly with the wildness of the surroundings, and his deep voice carried a measured dignity as he welcomed us. "Sir Henry, Dr. Watson, Dr. Mortimer," he said, bowing slightly. "The hall is prepared for your arrival, though it is a sombre place for a new master." Beside him stood Mrs. Barrymore, a plump woman whose anxious eyes and wringing hands betrayed a nervousness that her husband's composure lacked. She curtsied, her voice trembling as she spoke. "We've done our best, sir," she said to Sir Henry. "The fires are lit, and your rooms are ready." The interior of the hall was no less forbidding than its exterior. The great hall, with its high vaulted ceiling and oak panelling, was lined with portraits of Baskerville ancestors, their painted gazes stern and unyielding. A massive fireplace roared, but its warmth seemed swallowed by the vastness of the space, leaving the air heavy with the scent of old wood and damp stone. Sir Henry surveyed the room with a mixture of awe and resolve. "Needs a bit of life," he said, his voice echoing. "Some new curtains, a few lamps maybe, even a phonograph, to liven things up." I smiled at his optimism, though my thoughts were elsewhere. Holmes's directive to observe everything weighed heavily, and I noted the details of our surroundings, the worn tapestries, the creaking floorboards, the faint draught that stirred the air. As we were shown to our rooms, I caught a glimpse of a long corridor, its shadows deepening as the last light faded. A sound, faint but unmistakable, reached my ears, a low, mournful sob, like that of a woman in distress. I paused, but Mrs. Barrymore, leading the way, hurried on, her face averted. My room was a cavernous chamber, its walls adorned with faded hunting scenes, and its windows offering a view of the moor's endless expanse. I unpacked my valise, ensuring my revolver was within reach, and sat to pen my first report to Holmes. The sob lingered in my mind, and I recorded it, along with the hall's oppressive atmosphere and the Barrymore's contrasting demeanours. As I wrote, a tap at the door announced Dr. Mortimer, who entered with a troubled expression. "Dr. Watson," he said, his voice low, "I must speak with you privately. There are matters concerning the hall that I did not mention in London, for fear of alarming Sir Henry. I gestured for him to sit, my curiosity piqued. "Speak freely," I said. "Holmes relies on me to gather every detail." Dr. Mortimer adjusted his spectacles, his hands trembling slightly. "Since Sir Charles's death, the Hall has not been at peace. The servants Barrymore and his wife are loyal, but they are uneasy. There have been reports of strange occurrences, footsteps in the night, lights seen on the moor, and that sound you may have heard, a sob, or so it seems. Mrs. Barrymore denies it, but I suspect she knows more than she admits. And there is another matter. The village of Grimpen speaks of a convict, one Selden, who escaped from Princetown prison and is said to be hiding on the moor." I frowned, recalling Holmes's warning to trust no one. A convict. Could he be connected to the warning letter or the stolen boot? Dr. Mortimer shook his head. "I cannot say. Selden is a desperate man, a murderer, but his presence adds to the fear that grips this place. The villagers believe the hound is abroad, stirred by Sir Henry's arrival. I am a man of science, Dr. Watson, but I confess the moor works upon the nerves." His words confirmed my own unease, and I resolved to keep a close watch on the household. After he departed, I explored the hall, noting its labyrinthine corridors and the heavy silence that seemed to permeate every room. Dinner was a somber affair, served in a dining room dominated by a long table and a chandelier that cast flickering shadows. Sir Henry spoke of his plans to modernize the estate, but his cheerfulness seemed forced, and Barrymore's formal responses did little to lighten the mood. That night, as I lay in bed, the moor's silence was broken by another sound, faint rhythmic tapping like a signal. I rose, revolver in hand, and crept to the window. The mist had thickened, obscuring all but the nearest tors, but I thought I saw a fleeting light far out on the moor, winking briefly before vanishing. I made a note of it, determined to investigate further. The following morning, I accompanied Sir Henry on a walk through the grounds, where the moor's wild beauty was tempered by an undercurrent of menace. The paths were narrow, flanked by heather and gorse, and the distant howl of a dogreel or a magence set my nerves on edge. Sir Henry, however, seemed invigorated by the open air, his steps brisk as he spoke of drainage schemes and new tenant cottages. "This place needs a new start," he said. "I'll not let some old legend scare me off." As we returned to the hall, we encountered a man approaching on foot, a wiry figure with a sun-browned face and a knapsack slung over his shoulder. He introduced himself as Jack Stapleton, the naturalist from Merripit's house, and his manner was warm, almost effusive. "Sir Henry, Dr. Watson," he said, doffing his cap, "welcome to Dartmoor. I heard of your arrival and thought to pay my respects. The moor's a grand place, but it takes some getting used to." His eyes, bright and keen, seemed to study us with an intensity that belied his casual tone. I recalled Dr. Mortimer's mention of the Stapletons and made a mental note to observe him closely. "You're a student of the moor, I understand," I said. "Have you heard talk of this hound?" Stapleton laughed, though the sound was brittle. "Village gossip, nothing more. The moor breeds stories like it breeds mists. But I'll not deny it's a wild place, best to stay on the paths, especially after dark." His words echoed Perkins's warning, and I sensed a pattern in the caution that surrounded us. We parted with promises to visit Merripit House, but as we walked back to the hall, I felt the weight of unseen eyes. That afternoon, I explored the village of Grimpen, a cluster of stone cottages huddled against the moor's edge. The innkeeper, a stout man named Hawkins, spoke freely of the hound, his voice dropping to a whisper as he recounted tales of lights and howls. "It's been worse since Sir Charles died," he said. "The moor's not right, sir, and that's the truth." I returned to the hall with a growing sense of unease, my notebook filling with observations, the sob, the tapping, the light on the moor, Stapleton's calculated charm, the village's fear. I penned a second report to Holmes, detailing these findings and urging his guidance. As I sealed the letter, the memory of his words, "Trust no one," echoed in my mind. The moor stretched beyond the hall, its secrets hidden in the fog, and I knew that each step I took brought me closer to the heart of the mystery or to its jaws. Chapter 5. Shadows of Suspicion. The morning sun struggled to pierce the mist that cloaked Baskerville Hall, casting a pallid light over the moor and deepening the sense of isolation that hung about the ancient manor. I, Dr. John H. Watson, awoke. With a start, the echo of that mournful sob from my first night still lingering in my memory. The hall, with its creaking timbers and shadowed corridors, seemed to pulse with secrets, and Sherlock Holmes's directive to observe every detail weighed heavily upon me. Sir Henry Baskerville, my charge, was already at breakfast when I descended, his robust frame and hearty manner a stark contrast to the gloom of our surroundings. Yet even his optimism seemed tempered, his eyes darting to the windows as if expecting some unseen menace to emerge from the fog. "Good morning, Watson," he greeted, pushing aside a plate of kippers. "This place could use a bit of Canadian sunshine, but I'll make do. Care to join me for a walk later? I want to see more of this moor everyone's so afraid of." I agreed, though my thoughts were occupied by the events of the previous night. Rhythmic tapping, the fleeting light on the moor, and the unsettling encounter with Jack Stapleton. As we ate, Barrymore, the butler, moved silently about the room, his gaunt face impassive, while Mrs. Barrymore, her eyes red-rimmed, served coffee with a trembling hand. I noted their demeanor, recalling Holmes's warning to trust no one, and resolved to probe further into the household's dynamics. After breakfast, I took the opportunity to explore the grounds, my revolver tucked discreetly in my coat pocket. The moor stretched beyond the hall, a vast expanse of heather and granite, its paths winding treacherously close to the bogs of Grimpen Mire. The air was damp, carrying the scent of peat and decay, and the distant cry of a bird, perhaps a plover, added to the eerie stillness. As I walked, I came upon a narrow track leading to a cluster of ancient stone huts, their walls weathered by centuries of wind and rain. One, larger than the rest, showed signs of recent use, a patch of trampled grass, a faint smear of ash near the entrance. I made a mental note to investigate further, suspecting it might be a refuge for the escaped convict, Selden, whom Dr. Mortimer had mentioned. Returning to the hall, I found Sir Henry in conversation with Dr. Mortimer, who had arrived to check on his welfare. The physician's face was drawn, his spectacles slipping down his nose as he spoke of the moor's dangers. "I urge caution, Sir Henry," he said. "The paths are treacherous, and with Selden at large, it's no time for reckless exploration, sir." Henry laughed, though the sound was strained. "I've faced grizzlies in Canada, Mortimer. I'll not be scared off by a convict or a ghost story. But I'll take Watson along. He's got a steady head and a revolver to match." I nodded, grateful for his confidence, and we set out after lunch, following a path that skirted the edge of Grimpen Mire. The moor was a study in contrast, beautiful in its wildness, yet menacing in its silence. As we walked, Sir Henry spoke. of his plans to drain the bogs and bring modern farming to the estate. His voice filled with a determination that seemed to defy the moor's oppressive weight. I listened, but my eyes scanned the horizon, alert for any sign of movement. It was then that we encountered a figure approaching from the direction of Merripit House. She was a woman, slender and strikingly beautiful, with dark hair and eyes that held a quiet intensity. She introduced herself as Beryl Stapleton, sister to the naturalist we had met the previous day. Her manner was courteous but guarded, and her glance toward Sir Henry carried a weight I could not decipher. "Sir Henry." "Dr. Watson," she said, her voice soft yet clear, "my brother mentioned your arrival. I thought to welcome you, though the moor is a poor place for newcomers." Sir Henry, ever the gallant, smiled broadly. "It's a pleasure, Miss Stapleton. Your brother spoke highly of the moor's charms, and I see he didn't exaggerate." Beauty Beryl's cheeks flushed, but her eyes remained wary. "The moor is beautiful, but dangerous," she said. "Keep to the paths, Sir Henry, and avoid the mire. It has claimed more lives than the hound itself." Her mention of the hound sent a chill through me, and I seized the opportunity to probe. "You've heard the tales, then?" I asked. "Do you believe there's truth to them?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting the edge of her shawl. "I believe in what I see, Dr. Watson. The moor breeds fear, and fear breeds stories. But there are dangers here, real ones. Be cautious, both of you." Her words were cut short by the arrival of Jack Stapleton, who appeared as if summoned by her unease. His wiry frame and bright eyes were as I remembered, but his smile seemed forced, his gaze darting between us. "Beryl, you're alarming our guests," he said, his tone light but edged with reproach. "Sir Henry, Dr. Watson, forgive my sister. She's grown fanciful living out here." Beryl's lips tightened, but she said nothing, and we parted soon. After, Stapleton insisting we visit Merripit House for dinner the following evening. As we walked back to the hall, I pondered Beryl's warning, sensing a depth to her words that her brother's charm sought to obscure. Sir Henry, however, was smitten, his conversation turning to her beauty rather than her caution. That evening, as we dined in the hall's cavernous dining room, I observed the Barrymores closely. Barrymore movements were precise, almost mechanical. But Mrs. Barrymore's hands shook as she cleared the plates, her eyes avoiding mine. The sob I had heard the previous night returned, fainter but unmistakable, echoing from the upper floors. Sir Henry, engrossed in his plans for the estate, seemed not to notice, but I resolved to investigate. After dinner, I slipped into the corridor, following the sound to a locked door at the end of a darkened passage. The sob ceased as I approached, replaced by a faint rustling, like footsteps retreating. I knocked, but there was no answer, and I returned to my room, my suspicions of the Barrymores deepening. I added this incident to my report for Holmes, along with my encounter with Beryl Stapleton and the signs of habitation at the stone hut. The next day, I ventured into Grimpen village, seeking to learn more of the local sentiment. The inn, a low, stone building with a sagging roof, was a hub of gossip, and the innkeeper Hawkins was eager to talk. "The hound's abroad again," he said, his voice low. "Ever since Sir Charles died, we've heard it howling at night and lights moving on the moor. Some say it's Selden, stirring up trouble, but I reckon it's older than that." I pressed him for details, but he could offer only rumors of ghostly shapes, of villagers who avoided the moor after dusk, of a light seen near the ancient huts. His words confirmed the moor's hold on the imagination, but I sensed a kernel of truth beneath the superstition. Returning to the hall, I found a letter from Holmes, delivered by the morning post. It was brief but pointed. Watch the household, Watson, and the neighbors. The light you saw may be a signal trace. Trust your instincts, but verify your facts. Emboldened by his words, I resolved to investigate the tapping and the light. That night, as the hall grew quiet, I stationed myself at a window overlooking the moor. The mist was thinner, revealing the jagged outlines of the tors, and I waited, my eyes straining for any sign of movement. Hours passed, and I was near to abandoning my vigil when a flicker caught my attention, a single, deliberate flash, far out on the moor, answered by a second from a different point. It was no random occurrence, but a signal, purposeful and precise. Crept downstairs, intending to question Barrymore, but found the great hall empty, the fire reduced to embers. As I moved toward the servants' quarters, I heard the tapping again, coming from a window in the west wing. I approached cautiously, my revolver at the ready, and saw Barrymore. His face illuminated by a candle, holding it to the glass in a slow, rhythmic pattern. He started at my approach, the candle nearly falling from his hand. "Dr. Watson," he exclaimed, his voice hoarse. I was merely checking the windows. The wind, you know, it rattles them." His excuse was feeble, and I pressed him. "A signal, Barrymore. To whom, and why at this hour?" He hesitated, his eyes darting to the darkness beyond. Before he could answer, Mrs. Barrymore appeared, her face pale and tear-streaked. "It's no use, John," she said, her voice breaking. "Dr. Watson deserves the truth. It's for my brother Selden, the convict. We've been leaving food and signals to help him survive on the moor." Her confession stunned me, but her distress was genuine, and I felt a pang of sympathy. "Your brother is a murderer," I said gently, "but I'll not betray your confidence, provided he leaves the moor at once. This must stop, Mrs. Barrymore." She nodded, tears falling, and Barrymore led her away, his face a mask of resignation. I returned to my room, my mind racing. The signals explained the light, but not its counterpart on the moor. Was Selden alone, or was another player involved? I added this to my report, along with Beryl's warning and Stapleton's calculated charm, sensing that the threads of the mystery were beginning to intertwine. The moor, with its secrets and shadows, seemed to close in around the hall, and I knew that each day brought us closer to a confrontation with the unknown. Chapter 6. The convict on the moor. The dawn broke over Baskerville Hall with a reluctant light, the sun struggling to pierce the veil of mist that clung to the Dartmoor landscape. I, Dr. John H. Watson, awoke with a sense of purpose. The revelations of the previous night, Mrs. Barrymore's confession about her brother, the convict Selden, and the mysterious signals on the moor burning in my mind. The oppressive grandeur of the hall, with its shadowed corridors and stern portraits, seemed to press upon me, urging vigilance. Sherlock Holmes's instructions to observe every detail were my guide, and I felt the weight of his trust as I prepared to face another day in this desolate place. Breakfast was a quiet affair, Sir Henry Baskerville's usual vigour subdued by the atmosphere of the hall. He spoke little, his eyes drifting to the windows where the moor lay shrouded in fog. Barrymore served us with his customary formality, but I noted a new wariness in his demeanour, as if he feared further questions about his nocturnal activities. Mrs. Barrymore, her face pale and drawn, avoided my gaze, her hands busy with trivial tasks. I resolved to honor my promise not to betray their secret, provided Selden's presence on the moor ceased. But the signals I had witnessed suggested a complexity to the matter that demanded further scrutiny after breakfast. I proposed to Sir Henry that we explore the moor further, ostensibly to survey his estate, but with the intent of investigating the stone huts I had discovered. He agreed readily, eager for distraction from the hall's gloom. "Let's see what this land of mine holds," he said, his voice carrying a forced cheer. "I'll not let a few ghost stories keep me indoors." We set out, armed with and my revolver, the latter a precaution against the dangers Dr. Mortimer had described both human and natural. The moor was a labyrinth of heather and granite, its paths winding perilously close to the treacherous bogs of Grimpen Mire. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, and the silence was broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through the gorse. As we approached the cluster of ancient stone huts, I scanned the ground for signs of habitation, recalling the trampled grass and ash I had noted before. One hut, larger and better preserved than the rest, drew my attention. Its low entrance was partially obscured by bracken, but a faint trail led to it, marked by broken stems and scuffed earth. I motioned for Sir Henry to wait, and crept forward, my senses alert. Inside, I found evidence of recent use: a crude bed of heather, a tin of biscuits, and a charred stick that suggested a fire. The air held a faint odor of tobacco knot, the shag Holmes favored, but a coarser blend common among laborers. This, I surmised, was Selden's refuge, though the absence of fresh footprints suggested he had not been here recently. As I emerged, Sir Henry called out, pointing to a distant tor where a figure stood silhouetted against the sky. It was too far to discern details, but the man's stillness was unnerving, as if he watched us with deliberate intent. "Who's that?" Sir Henry asked, his hand shading his eyes. "One of your villagers, Watson, or something else?" I shook my head, my pulse quickening. "It could be Selden," I said, "or someone else entirely. Stay here, I'll investigate." Before I could move, the figure vanished, slipping behind the tor with a speed that suggested familiarity with the terrain. I gave chase, but the moor's uneven ground and sudden dips slowed my progress, and by the time I reached the tor, there was no sign of the man. The mist had thickened, cloaking the landscape in a grey haze, and I felt a pang of unease. Was this the same watcher who had signaled the previous night, or a new player in this unfolding drama? I returned to Sir Henry, who greeted me with a wry smile. "Lost him, eh? This moor's got more tricks than a card sharp." We continued our exploration, but the encounter left me wary, my eyes scanning every rise and hollow. As we neared a narrow path leading to Merripit House, we were hailed by Jack Stapleton, who emerged from the fog with his butterfly net slung over his shoulder. His wiry frame and bright eyes were as I remembered, but his smile seemed strained, his gaze lingering on Sir Henry with an intensity that set me on edge. "Out exploring, gentlemen," he said, his tone light but probing. "The moor's a fine place for a walk, but mind, the Myritts swallowed better men than us." Sir Henry laughed, his earlier unease forgotten. "I'm getting the hang of it, Stapleton. But tell me, have you seen anyone about? We spotted a fellow on that tor just now, gone before we could get a look." Stapleton's expression flickered, though he covered it with a shrug. "Likely a shepherd, or one of the village lads. The moor's full of wanderers, especially with that convict loose. Selden, they call him, a nasty piece of work." His mention of Selden was casual, but I noted the quick glance he cast toward the tor, as if confirming its emptiness. I changed the subject, asking about his studies, and he launched into a discourse on the moor's rare insects, his enthusiasm seeming to mask a deeper preoccupation. We parted with an invitation to dine at Merripit House that evening, and as we walked back to the hall, I pondered Stapleton's manner, sensing a calculation beneath his charm. That afternoon, I visited Grimpen village again, hoping to gather more about Selden and the moor's rumours. The innkeeper Hawkins was polishing glasses behind the bar, his face lighting up at my arrival. "Back so soon, Dr. Watson," he said. "The moor's got its hooks in you, I reckon." I ordered a pint to loosen his tongue and steered the conversation to the convict. Hawkins leaned close, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Selden's been seen, mark my words. A farmer near Fernworthy swore he saw a man skulking near the stone huts, and old Mrs. Lytton claims she heard howling, not a dog, mind you, but something bigger. The hound, they say, stirred up by Sir Henry's coming." I pressed him for specifics, but his tales were a tangle of hearsay and superstition. Still, the mention of the stone huts corroborated my findings, and I resolved to keep watch that night for further signals. Returning to the hall, I found Sir Henry in high spirits, preparing for our dinner at Merripit House. "That Miss Stapleton's a fine woman," he said, adjusting his tie. "I'm looking forward to this evening. Might take my mind off this gloomy pile." The journey to Merripit House was a short but perilous trek across the moor, the path illuminated only by our lanterns. The house itself was a low, rambling structure, its windows glowing warmly against the darkness. Beryl Stapleton greeted us at the door, her beauty even more striking in the soft light. Her eyes, however, held a shadow of fear, and when she shook my hand, her grip was tight, as if conveying an unspoken plea. Dinner was a simple but pleasant affair, with Stapleton dominating the conversation with tales of his entomological pursuits. Beryl spoke little, her glances toward Sir Henry filled with a strange intensity. As the evening wore on, I caught her slipping a note into my hand as she cleared a plate. I pocketed it discreetly, my pulse quickening. Later, in the privacy of the cloakroom, I read her words. "Leave the moor, Dr. Watson. There is danger here for Sir Henry most of all." The warning, written in a hurried hand, confirmed my suspicions of a deeper plot. I resolved to keep a closer eye on Stapleton, whose joviality now seemed a mask for something sinister. As we departed, Beryl's eyes met mine, her expression one of silent urgency. Sir Henry, oblivious, chatted amiably about the moor's potential, but I felt the weight of her warning like a stone. Back at the hall, the night was disturbed by another sound, low guttural howl rising from the moor and echoing through the corridors. Sir Henry froze, his face palling, and I gripped my revolver, my heart pounding. "That's no dog," he whispered. "What the devil is it, Watson?" I had no answer, but the howl strengthened my resolve. I sat up late, writing a detailed report to Holmes, recounting the stone hut, the watcher on the tour, Beryl's note, and the chilling sound. As I sealed the letter, the moor's silence seemed to mock me, its secrets buried in the fog. I knew that Selden's presence, the signals, and the hound were pieces of a puzzle that only Holmes could solve. But until his guidance arrived, I was determined to protect Sir Henry and uncover the truth. Chapter 7. The figure in the fog the morning mist hung low over Baskerville Hall, wrapping the ancient manor in a shroud that seemed to mirror the unease settling in my heart. I, Dr. John H. Watson, had slept fitfully, haunted by the howl that had pierced the previous night's silence, and Beryl Stapleton's cryptic warning to flee the moor. The weight of Sherlock Holmes's charge to observe, report, and protect Sir Henry Baskerville pressed upon me, and I rose with a determination to unravel the threads of this darkening mystery. The hall, with its shadowed corridors and brooding portraits, felt more like a prison than a home, its very walls seeming to whisper secrets I had yet to decipher. At breakfast, Sir Henry was subdued, his usual vigour tempered by the events of our dinner at Merripit House. The memory of Beryl's beauty lingered in his eyes, but so too did the echo of that unearthly howl. "Watson," he said, pushing aside his plate, "I'm no coward, but that sound last night wasn't natural. I've half a mind to pack up and head back to Canada." I reassured him as best I could, urging patience until Holmes could shed light on the matter. "We're not alone in this," I said. "Holmes is working in London, and I'm here to see you through. Whatever that noise was, we'll face it together." My words seemed to bolster him, and he nodded, resolving to inspect the estate's boundaries that morning. I agreed to accompany him, my mind fixed on the watcher I had glimpsed on the tour and the signals exchanged across the moor. Barrymore served us in silence, his gaunt face unreadable, while Mrs. Barrymore's hands trembled as she poured coffee, her eyes avoiding mine. Their connection to Selden, the escaped convict, was a thread I could not ignore, and I resolved to press them further, despite my promise of discretion. After breakfast, I slipped away to the west wing, where I had heard the tapping 2 nights prior. The corridor was dim, its windows obscured by heavy curtains, and the air carried a faint mustiness that spoke of disuse. I examined the window where Barrymore had stood, noting scratches on the sill, as if a tool had been used to pry it open. The view beyond revealed the moor's vast expanse, its tors rising like silent sentinels through the fog. I found no further clues, but the scratches suggested more than a simple signal, perhaps a means of entry or exit. My thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, not the sob I had heard before, but a creak, as if a door had been cautiously opened. I turned, revolver in hand, but the corridor was empty, its shadows mocking my vigilance. I made a mental note to report this to Holmes, suspecting that the hall held secrets beyond the Barrymore's confession. Sir Henry and I set out mid-morning, following a path that wound along the estate's edge, where stone walls marked the boundary between cultivated land and the wild moor. The fog was thick, reducing visibility to a few yards, and the air was heavy with the scent of wet heather. Sir Henry walked with purpose, his stick tapping the ground, but his eyes darted to every rustle in the undergrowth. "This place gets under your skin," he muttered. "I'd trade it for a prairie any day." We had not gone far when a figure emerged from the mist, moving with a grace that belied the uneven terrain. It was Beryl Stapleton, her dark hair damp from the fog, her face pale but composed. She carried a small basket, as if gathering specimens, but her eyes held a tension that contradicted her casual demeanour. "Sir Henry, Dr. Watson," she greeted, her voice low. "I did not expect to meet you so far from the hall." Sir Henry's face lit up, his unease forgotten. "Miss Stapleton, a pleasure. Out collecting butterflies like your brother." She smiled faintly, but her gaze flickered to me, carrying a silent urgency. "Not today," she said. "I walk to clear my thoughts. The moor is a place for reflection, though it offers little peace." Her words echoed her warning from the previous night, and I seized the moment to probe. "You spoke of danger last evening," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Is there something specific we should know?" For Sir Henry's safety, any detail could be vital. Beryl hesitated, her fingers tightening on the basket's handle. The moor is full of dangers, she said carefully. The mire, the weather, the loneliness it preys on the mind. And there are those who would exploit its secrets. Be wary, Dr. Watson, and keep Sir Henry close. Before I could press further, a shout interrupted us. Jack Stapleton appeared, his butterfly net swinging as he hurried toward us. "Beryl, you'll catch your death in this fog," he called, his tone jovial but edged with irritation. "Gentlemen, forgive my sister, she's prone to wandering. The moor's no place for solitary strolls." Beryl's expression tightened, but she said nothing, allowing Stapleton to steer the conversation to his latest finder, rare moth, he claimed, unique to Dartmoor. His knowledge was impressive, but his eyes never left Sir Henry, as if measuring him. We parted with renewed promises to dine at Merripit House, but as we walked away, I felt Beryl's warning like a weight in my pocket. Back at the hall, I penned a report to Holmes, detailing the scratches on the window, the creak in the corridor, Beryl's cryptic words, and Stapleton's timely arrival. The howl, I noted, had not recurred, but its memory lingered, a spectre that haunted both Sir Henry and myself. I dispatched the letter to Grimpen's post office, hoping Holmes's reply would bring clarity to the growing web of clues. That afternoon, I resolved to track the watcher on the tour, convinced he held a key to the mystery. Armed with my revolver and a map from Dr. Mortimer, I set out alone, leaving Sir Henry to review estate papers. The moor was a maze of fog and shadow, its paths treacherous with hidden bogs. I followed the track to the tor where we had seen the figure, my senses alert for any sign of movement. The air was still, the silence broken only by the drip of moisture from the heather. As I neared the tor, a faint sound reached me, a low, rhythmic crunch, like footsteps on gravel. I crouched behind a boulder, my revolver ready, and peered through the mist. A man stood atop the tor, his figure tall and lean, his face obscured by a scarf. He held a pair of binoculars, trained on Baskerville Hall, his posture one of intense concentration. I crept closer, but a twig snapped underfoot, and he turned, his eyes meeting mine for a fleeting moment before he bolted, vanishing into the fog with a speed that suggested intimate knowledge of the terrain. I gave chase, my heart pounding, but the moor's uneven ground and sudden dips thwarted me. By the time I reached the tor's summit, he was gone, leaving only a faint trail of disturbed earth. I searched the area, finding a cigarette stub cheap, acrid, unlike the tobacco I had smelled in the stone hut. This was no ordinary vagrant, I thought, but someone with a purpose, perhaps linked to the signals I had observed. Frustrated but undeterred, I returned to the stone hut I had visited with Sir Henry. The signs of habitation were fresher, now a new pile of ash, a scrap of cloth torn from a rough shirt. I pocketed the cloth, suspecting it belonged to Selden, and made ascending a stone staircase. I paused at the top, peering down the gloomy staircase, my heart still racing from the chase. The mist had thickened, and the moor seemed to close in. Around me, its silence a stark contrast to the tumult of my thoughts. I resolved to return to the hall and plan my next move, determined to uncover the identity of the watcher and the truth behind Beryl's warning. That evening, as we dined in the hall's cavernous dining room, Sir Henry spoke of Beryl with a warmth that bordered on infatuation. Oblivious to the undercurrents I had sensed at Merripit House, Barrymore's service was as impeccable as ever, but I caught him exchanging a glance with his wife when he thought I wasn't looking, a glance that spoke of shared secrets. After dinner, I retired to my room, my notebook filling with observations, the watcher, the cigarette stub, the cloth, Beryl's warning, and the ever-present shadow of the hound. As I wrote, a new sound reached me, not a howl, but a faint, deliberate scratch at my window. I sprang up, revolver in hand, but found nothing outside, only a single pebble on the sill, as if someone had tested my vigilance. I added this to my report, my suspicion growing that the hall itself was a stage for unseen players. The moor, with its fog and secrets, seemed to tighten its grip, and I knew that only Holmes's genius could pierce its veil. Chapter 8. Holmes on the moor. The fog that enveloped Baskerville Hall seemed to thicken with each passing day, its grey tendrils curling about the ancient manor like a shroud woven from the moor's own secrets. I, Dr. John H. Watson, awoke with a mind heavy with the weight of recent discoveries, the watcher on the tour, the pebble at my window, Beryl Stapleton's urgent warning, and the rhythmic signals that pierced the night. The charge laid upon me by Sherlock Holmes to observe, to report, to protect Sir Henry Baskerville had grown ever more daunting, and the hall's oppressive atmosphere, with its shadowed corridors and stern portraits, seemed to conspire with the moor's mysteries to test my resolve. Yet I was determined to press forward, driven by the need to unravel the enigma that threatened my friend's life. Breakfast was a subdued affair, Sir Henry's usual buoyancy dimmed by the cumulative dread of the moor's terrors. He spoke of plans to meet with tenants, but his eyes strayed to the windows, where the fog obscured the tors, rendering them mere phantoms against the grey. Barrymore served us with his customary formality, but I noted a flicker of unease in his gaunt features, as if he sensed my growing suspicion of his nocturnal activities. Mrs. Barrymore, her face pale and drawn, moved with a nervous haste, her hands trembling as she cleared the plates. Their connection to Selden, the escaped convict, and the mysterious signals they had confessed to sending under duress, loomed large in my thoughts, and I resolved to probe deeper into the unknown man who orchestrated their actions. As we finished our meal, Sir Henry proposed a walk to inspect the estate's boundaries, hoping to shake off the hall's gloom. I agreed, my mind fixed on the watcher I had glimpsed on Black Tor, armed with binoculars and the need to trace the signals that had flickered across the moor. Before we departed, I slipped into the west wing, where I had heard the tapping and found the scratched windowsill. The corridor was dim, its air heavy with the scent of old wood, and I examined the window closely, noting a fresh smudge of mud on the frame distinct from the moor's peaty soil, suggesting an outsider's presence. A faint scratch, deeper than before, hinted at an attempted intrusion, and I pocketed a sample of the mud, intending to send it to Holmes for analysis. Our walk took us along a path that skirted the edge of Grimpen Mire, the fog reducing visibility to a few yards, the air thick with the scent of damp heather. Sir Henry walked with a determined stride, but his eyes darted to every rustle in the undergrowth, betraying his unease. "This place gets under your skin, Watson," he said, his voice low. "I'd give a year's rent for a clear sky and a straight answer." As we neared a cluster of ancient stone huts, relics of a forgotten age, a figure emerged from the mist, a tall, lean silhouette, moving with a quiet assurance that set my nerves on edge. My hand went to my revolver, but as the figure drew closer, I recognized the sharp features and piercing grey eyes of Sherlock Holmes himself. His sudden appearance on the moor was a shock, yet a wave of relief washed over me, for his presence was a promise of clarity in this fog of mystery. Holmes, I exclaimed, my voice betraying my astonishment. How long have you been here? I thought you were in London. He raised a hand, his expression calm but intense. My apologies for the deception, Watson, he said, his voice low to avoid. Sir Henry's notice, who was some paces ahead, examining a boundary stone. I have been on the moor these past 3 days, observing from a distance. The case demanded my presence, but secrecy was paramount. You have done admirably, but the time for action is at hand. Sir Henry turned, his face lighting up at the sight of Holmes. Mr. Holmes, by God, this is a surprise. Have you come to put an end to this hound nonsense? Holmes inclined his head, his eyes scanning the horizon. I have come to resolve the matter, Sir Henry. But first, Watson, you'll report every detail, if you please. I recounted the events since my arrival, the sob in the hall, the signals from the west wing, the watcher on Black Tor, Beryl's warnings, the cigarette stub, the cloth in the stone hut, and the pebble at my window. Holmes listened in silence, his fingers steepled before his lips, his mind a crucible where facts were forged into truth. When I finished, he nodded, his eyes gleaming with purpose. Your observations confirm my suspicions, he said. The signals, the watcher, the warnings all point to a deliberate plot. Centered on Sir Henry, the hound is no myth, but a tool, and its master is close. The Stapletons bear watching Beryl's warnings suggest a conflict within, but her brother's knowledge of the moor makes him a formidable adversary. Sir Henry, overhearing, frowned. You think Stapleton's behind this? He's a bit odd, but he seems harmless enough. Holmes's smile was faint, but sharp. The most dangerous men often do, Sir Henry. But let us proceed with caution, Watson. You will continue as my eyes and ears, but I shall remain on the moor unseen to pursue certain threads. Tonight we dine at Merripit's house, as planned. Observe Stapleton closely every word, every glance, and keep Sir Henry from the moor after dark. I nodded, my resolve strengthened by his presence. What of the signals? I asked. Barrymore admitted to aiding Selden, but under orders from an unknown man. Could it be Stapleton? Holmes's eyes narrowed. Possibly, but the evidence is incomplete. The mud you found, the cigarette stub, the binoculars, these suggest a man of resource, familiar with the moor's ways. I have a theory, but it requires proof. Tonight, I shall watch from the shadows. If the hound moves, we shall be ready. We parted, Holmes vanishing into the fog with a stealth that seemed almost supernatural. Sir Henry, heartened by Holmes's arrival, walked with renewed vigor, but I felt the weight of the coming night, knowing that the truth was near, yet perilous. Back at the hall, I prepared for our dinner at Merripit House, my mind racing with Holmes's words. The mud, the signals, Beryl's fear all pointed to a climax, and I gripped my revolver, determined to protect Sir Henry at all costs. The journey to Merripit House was a tense affair, the fog thicker than ever, our lanterns casting ghostly beams across the path. Beryl greeted us with a strained smile, her beauty marred by a shadow of dread, her eyes darting to the windows as if expecting an ambush. Jack Stapleton was his usual effusive self, regaling us with tales of the moor's rare insects, but I noted a nervousness in his manner, his laughter too quick, his glances too sharp. Over dinner, I steered the conversation to the moor's mysteries, hoping to provoke a reaction. Stapleton, I said, my tone casual, you've lived here some time. Those lights on Black Tor farmers say they're signals. Have you seen them? His hand paused, the wine glass trembling slightly. Village gossip, Dr. Watson, he replied, his smile tight. The moors full of Trix marsh gas, perhaps, or shepherds lost in the fog. Beryl's eyes met mine, a silent plea, and I pressed further, and the howl, it's been heard closer to the hall. Surely you've noticed something, living, so near. Stapleton's face darkened, but he recovered quickly. Stray dogs, nothing more. The more amplifies sound, makes it seem nearer than it is. You're letting the legend get to you. His evasions were too practiced, and I sensed Beryl's tension growing. As we lingered over coffee, she slipped another note into my hand, her fingers trembling. I read it in the cloakroom, its words stark. The hound hunts tonight. Keep Sir Henry from the path. The urgency confirmed my fears, and I resolved to keep Sir Henry within the hall. Whatever the cost, the return journey was fraught with peril, the fog a wall of grey that swallowed our lantern's light. Sir Henry, buoyed by Beryl's presence, spoke of her with a warmth that worried me, oblivious to the danger she warned of. As we neared the hall, a sound stopped Usalo, guttural howl, rising from the moor like a cry from the abyss. It was closer than ever, its menace palpable, and Sir Henry's face paled, his hand gripping my arm. "Good God, Watson," he whispered. "That's no dog." I drew my revolver, urging him onward. "Stay close," I said, my voice steady. Despite my fear, we're nearly home. The howl faded, but its echo lingered, a reminder of the threat that stalked us. Back at the hall, I stationed myself in the great hall, the windows offering a view of the drive. The fog was impenetrable, but I waited, my revolver ready, knowing Holmes was out there, watching. Hours passed, and I was near to abandoning my vigil when a flash caught my eye, single, deliberate beam from Black Tor, answered by a second from the stone huts. The signals had resumed, despite my warning to Barrymore. I crept to the west wing, where I found Barrymore at the window, his candle flashing in a slow rhythm. "Barrymore," I hissed, stepping forward. "You swore this would stop." "Who are you signaling?" he started, the candle nearly falling. "Dr. Watson, it's not what you think." The man, he left another note, threatened to burn the hall if we didn't comply. "I swear, we've done no harm." His fear was genuine, but I pressed him. "Show me the note." He produced a crumpled paper, its words scrawled in a crude hand. "Signal at midnight. Keep the baronet out." I pocketed it, my suspicions of Stapleton deepening, and warned Barrymore to cease, promising to deal with the stranger myself. As I returned to my room, a new sound reached me, a faint, deliberate scratch at the west wing window, where the sketch had marked an X. I rushed to investigate, but found only a broken twig, as if someone had tested the latch. I penned a hurried report to Holmes, detailing the signals, Beryl's note, and the twig, and sealed it with a sense of urgency. The moor's secrets were closing in, and with Holmes on the scene, I knew the truth was within reach. Chapter 9. Death in the gully. The moor lay shrouded in a fog that seemed to breathe with a life of its own, its grey tendrils weaving through the tors and bogs, cloaking Baskerville Hall in an oppressive silence. I, Dr. John H. Watson, sat by the fire in the great hall, my revolver at hand. The events of the previous night, the resumed signals, Beryl Stapleton's desperate warning, and Sherlock Holmes's sudden appearance on the moor burning in my mind. Holmes's presence, though a beacon of hope, had intensified the urgency of my task to protect Sir Henry Baskerville, and the hall's shadowed corridors, with their stern portraits and creaking timbers, seemed to pulse with the weight of secrets yet uncovered. The broken twig at the west wing window and the scrawled note demanding Sir Henry be kept out had set my nerves on edge, and I knew the crisis was near. Breakfast was a tense affair, Sir Henry's face drawn with the strain of the howl that had pierced the night, and the knowledge that Holmes was now among us, unseen but vigilant. He spoke little, his eyes fixed on the fog beyond the windows, where the moor's vastness seemed to mock our efforts to master it. Barrymore served with his usual precision, but his gaunt features betrayed a flicker of fear, as if he dreaded the consequences of his coerced signals. Mrs. Barrymore, her eyes red-rimmed, moved with a nervous haste, her hands trembling as she poured tea. Their confession of aiding Selden, the escaped convict, under orders from an unknown man, had deepened my suspicions, and I resolved to confront them further, though Holmes's directive to watch and wait restrained me as we finished our meal. Sir Henry proposed a visit to the village of Grimpen to meet with tenants, hoping to distract himself from the growing dread. I hesitated, wary of leaving the hall after Beryl's warning. But Holmes's presence on the moor emboldened me, and I agreed, intending to gather more intelligence from the villagers. Before we departed, I slipped into the west wing, re-examining the window where the twig had been broken. The scratches on the latch were deeper now, and a faint smear of mud distinct from the moors. Peaty soil suggested a recent attempt at entry. I pocketed a sample of the mud, adding it to my growing collection of clues, and penned a brief note to Holmes, detailing the resumed signals and the window's condition, which I left with Barrymore to dispatch to the stone hut where Holmes had hinted he was encamped. The journey to Grimpen was a slow trek through the fog, the dog-cart rattling along a path flanked by heather and gorse. Sir Henry was silent, his thoughts consumed by Beryl's beauty and the Howls' menace, while I scanned the horizon for any sign of Holmes or the Watcher. In the village, the inn was a hub of whispers, the locals' faces weathered by the moor's harshness. I approached Tregennis, the grizzled farmer who had spoken of lights near Black Tor, hoping for fresh insight. "Dr. Watson," he said, his voice low, "the moor's turned darker since you came. Last night, I heard a the hound, but a man, down in the gully near Fox Tor. I daren't go look, but something's amiss." His words sent a chill through me, recalling the howl and the signals. "A scream," I pressed. "Where exactly, and when?" "Past midnight," he replied, pointing toward a rugged path. "The gully's a treacherous spot, all rocks and mire. If a man fell there, he'd not come out alive." I thanked him, my mind racing, and resolved to investigate the gully, suspecting it was linked to the signals and the Watcher. Sir Henry, eager to return to the hall, agreed to my detour, though his unease was palpable. We set out for Fox Tor, the fog thickening as we descended into a narrow ravine, its walls of jagged granite rising like the jaws of a trap. The path was slippery, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth, and I gripped my revolver, alert for any sound as we reached the gully's heart. A grim sight met my Easerman's body, sprawled among the rocks, his limbs twisted at unnatural angles, his face frozen in a mask of terror. It was Selden, the escaped convict, his rough features unmistakable despite the blood and bruises. His clothes, cast-offs from Sir Henry, were torn, and deep, claw-like marks scarred the earth nearby, their size too large for any natural beast. My heart sank as I recognized the signs of the hound, its presence no longer a legend but a lethal reality. I knelt beside Selden, confirming his death, and noted the tracks leading toward Grimpenmire, where the fog swallowed them. Good God! Watson, Sir Henry whispered, his voice trembling. The hound, it's real, and it took him thinking he was me. I nodded, the truth dawning with chilling clarity. Selden's death, in Sir Henry's clothes, was no accident. The hound had been set upon him, part of a plot to eliminate the baronet. I marked the spot with a pile of stones, intending to return with Holmes, and urged Sir Henry back to the hall. My revolver drawn against the fog's unseen threats dotted the hall. I found Barrymore and his wife in the great hall, their faces ashen. As I recounted Selden's fate, Mrs. Barrymore collapsed in tears, her grief genuine, while Barrymore's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the windows. "We didn't know," he said hoarsely. "The man, the one who forced the signals, he said it was to help Selden escape. We never meant for this." I pressed them for more, but their fear was palpable, and I sensed they had told all they knew. I sent for Dr. Mortimer, hoping his medical expertise could confirm the cause of death, and penned a hurried report to Holmes, detailing Selden's end, the hound's tracks, and the gully's grim scene. As I sealed the letter, Sir Henry spoke, his voice resolute. "This ends. Now, Watson, I'll face this beast, man or hound, and be done with it." His determination strengthened my own, and I proposed we proceed to Merripit House for dinner, using the occasion to confront Jack Stapleton, whose initials on the knife and proximity to the signals made him a prime suspect. Holmes's letter had urged caution, and I resolved to keep Sir Henry close, suspecting the hound's next move was imminent. The journey to Merripit House was a tense trek through the fog, our lanterns casting feeble beams against the darkness. Beryl greeted us with a strained courtesy, her beauty marred by a shadow of dread, her eyes pleading silently as she shook my hand. Stapleton was his usual charming self, but his laughter rang hollow, and I noted a tremor in his hand as he served wine over dinner. I steered the conversation to the moor's dangers, hoping to provoke a reaction. "Stapleton," I said, my tone measured. "Selden was found dead in the gully near Foxtor, torn by something large. You know the moor well. Have you seen such a beast?" His face paled, but he recovered quickly, his smile forced. "A tragedy, Dr. Watson. The moor's full of strays, and the gully's a death trap. Selden was a fool to wander there." Beryl's hand tightened on her glass, and I pressed further. "And the signals on Black Tor, they've been seen again, near your home. Surely you've noticed something." Stapleton's eyes narrowed, but he shrugged. "Poachers, perhaps. The moor's a wild place, sure seeing shadows where there are none." His deflections were too smooth, and I sensed Beryl's fear growing. As we prepared to leave, she slipped a note into my hand, her fingers trembling. I read it in the dog-cart, its words stark. "The hound hunts tonight. Keep him inside." The urgency confirmed my suspicions, and I urged Sir Henry to stay within the hall, citing the fog's peril. Back at the hall, I prepared for the night, my revolver loaded and my lantern ready. As midnight approached, a howl rose from the moor closer, more menacing than ever, its sound a visceral threat. I stationed myself at the west wing window, where the signals had originated, and waited, my heart pounding. A flash caught my ardor, deliberate beam from Black Tor, answered by another from the stone huts. Before I could act, a figure emerged. From the fog Holmes, his lean frame unmistakable, his eyes blazing with purpose. "Watson," he whispered, joining me at the window. "The trap is set. Stapleton is our man, and the hound is his weapon. Stay with Sir Henry. I'll track the beast." Before I could protest, he vanished into the fog, his footsteps silent. The howl came again, and I rushed to Sir Henry's side, determined to keep him safe as Holmes faced the moor's terror alone. Chapter 10. Death in the Gully. The fog that cloaked Baskerville Hall seemed to pulse with a malevolent life, its grey tendrils weaving through the moors, tors and bogs, casting an oppressive pall over the ancient manor. I, Dr. John H. Watson, stood at the west wing window, my revolver gripped tightly, the howl of the hound and Sherlock Holmes's sudden appearance on the moor still vivid in my mind. The death of Selden, the escaped convict, in the gully near Foxtor, torn by a beast of unnatural size, had confirmed the hound's lethal reality, and Beryl Stapleton's warning, "The hound hunts tonight," had set my nerves on edge. Holmes's directive to keep Sir Henry Baskerville safe while he tracked the beast filled me with both hope and dread. For the moor's secrets were closing in, and I sensed the climax of this dark drama was at hand. The morning dawned with a reluctant light, the sun a pale disk behind the mist, offering no warmth to dispel the hall's gloom. Sir Henry joined me at breakfast, his face ashen, the weight of Selden's death and the hound's proximity eroding his usual vigour. He spoke little, his eyes fixed on the fog beyond the windows, where the moor's jagged outlines seemed to mock our efforts to unravel its mysteries. Barrymore served with his customary precision, but his gaunt features betrayed a flicker of guilt, his wife's tearful confession of their coerced signals still hanging between us. Mrs. Barrymore, her eyes swollen from grief, moved with a mechanical haste, as if seeking to outrun her sorrow for her brother's fate. As we finished our meal, Sir Henry proposed a visit to Dr. Mortimer to discuss Selden's death, hoping to quell the village's growing panic. I hesitated, wary of leaving the hall after Beryl's warning. But Holmes's presence on the moor emboldened me, and I agreed, intending to probe Mortimer for any overlooked details about the moor's inhabitants. Before we departed, I revisited the west wing, where the scratched window and broken twig had suggested an attempted intrusion. The latch bore fresh marks, deeper than before, and a faint smear of mud matching that found on the attic roof confirmed an outsider's persistence. I pocketed a sample, adding it to my report for Holmes, which detailed Selden's death, the hound's tracks, and Beryl's urgent note. The journey to Grimpen was a tense trek through the fog, the dog-cart rattling along a path flanked by heather and gorse. Sir Henry was silent, his thoughts consumed by the gully's grim scene, while I scanned the horizon for any sign of Holmes or the Watcher. At Mortimer's cottage, we found the physician pale and shaken, his spectacles slipping as he recounted his examination of Selden's body. "The trauma was severe," he said, his voice trembling. "Broken bones, as from a fall, but the terror on his face and those tracks. Watson, too large for any natural beast." I pressed him for more, recalling Holmes's insistence on precision. "Have you heard of similar incidents, or seen anyone near Foxtor who might know more?" Mortimer hesitated, his fingers drumming on his stick. "The villagers speak of lights near the tor, and a man cloaked, always in shadow. Old Mrs. Lytton swears she saw him 2 nights ago, watching the hall. I thought it mere gossip, but now—" His words echoed Tregennis's tale, and I resolved to revisit the gully, suspecting the cloaked figure was the key to the signals and the hound. Sir Henry, eager to act, agreed to accompany me, his revolver at hand. "I'll not cower in the hall," he said, his jaw set. If there's a man behind this, we'll face him. The path to Fox Tor was treacherous, the fog thickening as we descended into the gully, its granite walls rising like a trap. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, and the silence was broken only by the drip of moisture from the heather. As we neared the spot where Selden had fallen, a new horror met my eyes. A second body, sprawled among the rocks, its limbs twisted in death. It was a man, tall and wiry, his face obscured by a scarf, his cloak torn and bloodied. The same claw-like marks scarred the earth, their size unmistakable, and a broken lantern lay nearby, its glass shattered. I knelt beside the body, my heart pounding, and removed the scarf, revealing features I recognized with a jolt. Jack Stapleton, the naturalist, his eyes wide with terror, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. The hound had struck again, and its master, if Holmes's suspicions were correct, had become its victim. Sir Henry gasped, his face pale. Stapleton, but why? How? I shook my head, my mind racing. The tracks led toward Grimpen Mire, their edges fresh, and I suspected Stapleton had been caught in his own trap, perhaps fleeing the beast he had unleashed. I searched the body, finding a whistle, its surface etched with a crude hound's head, and a crumpled note, release at midnight. Target on path. The handwriting matched the signal's instructions, confirming Stapleton's role as the plot's architect. We must find Holmes, I said, urging Sir Henry back to the hall. He's tracking the hound, and this changes everything. As we hurried through the fog, a figure emerged. Holmes, his lean frame unmistakable, his eyes blazing with purpose. Watson, Sir Henry, he said, his voice calm but urgent. I saw the beast's work from the Tor. Stapleton is dead, but the hound remains. We must act tonight. I recounted our findings, the body, the whistle, the note, and Holmes nodded, his mind piecing together the puzzle. Stapleton was a Baskerville, he revealed, a distant cousin, driven by greed for the estate. He trained the mastiff bloodhound crossed to kill, using phosphorus to create its ghostly glow. Selden's death was a mistake. He wore your clothes, Sir Henry. Stapleton meant to eliminate you, masking murder as the family curse. I handed him Beryl's note, and he read it with a grim nod. Beryl, his wife, not sister, tried to warn you, torn by fear and conscience. She's at Merripit House. We must secure her before the hound returns. We hastened to Merripit House, the fog a wall of grey that swallowed our lantern's light. Beryl was there, trembling, her face streaked with tears. He's gone, she sobbed. I tried to stop him, but he loosed the hound tonight, thinking to end it. The mire took him. I heard his scream. Holmes's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. You're safe now, Mrs. Stapleton, but the hound is loose. Where did he keep it? She led us to a shed behind the house, its door ajar, the stench of beast and decay heavy in the air. The hound was gone, its chains broken, and Holmes's face darkened. It's hunting, he said. We must draw it out, Sir Henry. You're the bait. Despite my protests, Sir Henry agreed, his resolve unshaken. We returned to the hall, Holmes outlining a plan. Sir Henry would walk the path to Merripit House at midnight, while Holmes and I lay in wait near the gully. As the hour approached, the fog thickened, and a howl rose close, visceral, its menace a physical force. Sir Henry stepped out, his revolver ready, while Holmes and I took position behind a tor, our weapons drawn. The hound emerged from the fog, its massive form glowing with an eerie light, its jaws dripping with saliva. I fired, the shot echoing, but it charged, undeterred. Holmes's aim was true, his bullets striking the beast's flank, and it staggered, a low whine escaping its throat. Sir Henry fired, and the hound collapsed, its eyes dimming in death. Holmes knelt beside it, his face grim. "A monstrous thing," he said, "bred for murder. Stapleton's scheme ends here." We returned to the hall, Beryl safe, the curse broken. Holmes explained the rest. Stapleton's lineage, his use of the Moor's legends, the signals to control the hound. The Maya, he deduced, had claimed Stapleton, his own trap, his undoing. Sir Henry, shaken but resolute, vowed to restore the hall, and I penned a final report to Holmes, the Moor's secrets laid bare by his genius. Chapter 11. The Mayas embraced the fog that enveloped Baskerville Hall seemed to tighten its grip with each passing hour. Its grey tendrils weaving through the moors, tors and bogs, casting a pall of dread over the ancient manor. I, Dr. John H. Watson, stood in the great hall, my revolver at hand. The memory of Jack Stapleton's broken body in the gully near Fox Tor seared into my mind. The revelation of his role as the mastermind behind the hound, a monstrous beast bred to kill, had brought the mystery into sharp focus, yet the creature itself remained at large, its howls echoing ever closer. Sherlock Holmes's presence on the moor, his keen mind now guiding our efforts, was a beacon of hope, but Beryl Stapleton's warning, "The hound hunts tonight," and the whistle found on her husband's body suggested a plan still in motion. The hall's shadowed corridors, with their stern portraits and creaking timbers, pulsed with an unspoken menace, urging me to protect Sir Henry Baskerville at all costs. The morning dawned with a feeble light, the sun struggling to pierce the mist that cloaked the moor in an eerie half-gloom. Sir Henry joined me at breakfast, his face haggard, the weight of Stapleton's death and the hound's threat eroding his resolve. He spoke little, his eyes fixed on the fog beyond the windows, where the tors stood like phantoms against the grey. Barrymore served with his usual formality, but his gaunt features betrayed a flicker of relief, as if Stapleton's demise had lifted a burden from his conscience. Mrs. Barrymore, her grief for her brother Selden still raw, moved with a quiet resignation, her hands steady but her eyes avoiding mine. Their coerced signals, ordered by Stapleton, had led to Selden's death, and I sensed they feared further revelations as we finished our meal. Sir Henry proposed returning to Fox Tor to examine the gully, hoping to find clues to the hounds. There I hesitated, wary of the moor's dangers and Beryl's warning, but Holmes's directive to keep Sir Henry safe while he tracked the beast emboldened me. "We'll go together," I said, "but stay close and keep your revolver ready." Before we departed, I revisited the west wing, where the scratched window and broken twig had suggested an attempted intrusion. The latch bore fresh marks, and a faint smear of mud matching that found in the gully confirmed an outsider's persistence. I pocketed a sample, adding it to my report for Holmes, which detailed Stapleton's death. The whistle etched with a hound's head, and the note, "Release at midnight. Target on path." I left the report with Barrymore, instructing him to place it in the stone hut, where Holmes had hinted he was encamped. Trusting his unseen vigilance, the journey to Fox Tor was a perilous trek through the fog, the path winding, past bogs that gleamed with deceptive calm. Sir Henry walked with a determined stride, his revolver at hand, but his eyes darted to every rustle in the heather, betraying his fear. As we descended into the gully, the air grew heavy with the scent of peat and decay, and the granite walls rose like a trap around us. The spot where Stapleton's body had lain was marked by our pile of stones. But a new disturbance caught my eye, a fresh set of tracks, larger than any dog's, leading toward Grimpen Mire. My heart sank as I recognized the hound's claw-like marks, their edges sharp in the damp earth. Before I could examine them further, a cry pierced the fogre human scream, raw with terror, echoing from the direction of the mire. Sir Henry froze, his revolver raised, and I gripped mine, my pulse racing. "Stay here," I ordered, but he followed, his resolve unshaken. We hurried toward the sound, the path narrowing as it skirted the mire's edge, its surface a treacherous sheen of green and black. The fog parted briefly, revealing a grim Cedarman's body, half sunk in the mire, his arms outstretched, as if clawing for salvation. It was not Stapleton, but a stranger, his face obscured by mud, his clothes coarse and torn, a knapsack beside him. I approached cautiously, my boots sinking into the soft earth, and knelt to examine the body. The man was dead, his eyes wide with fear, his hands marked by scratches that matched the hound's tracks. A broken lantern lay nearby, its glass shattered, and a crumpled note protruded from his pocket. I unfolded it, my hands trembling. "Meet at Mire's edge, midnight. Bring the coin." The handwriting matched Stapleton's notes, suggesting this man was an accomplice, lured to his doom by the hound or the mire's embrace. "Good God, Watson," Sir Henry whispered, his voice hoarse. "Another victim. Is this beast unstoppable?" I shook my head, my mind racing. "The hound is a tool, Sir Henry, and its master is dead. But someone released it last night. This man may have been part of the plot." I pocketed the note, marking the spot with a stick, and urged Sir Henry back to the hall, fearing the hound's proximity as we returned. A figure emerged from the foghorns, his lean frame unmistakable, his eyes blazing with purpose. "Watson." "Sir Henry," he said, his voice calm but urgent. I heard the scream from Black Tor. Another death in the mire. I recounted our findings, the body, the note, the hound's tracks, and handed him the note. Holmes read it, his face grim. "This man was Stapleton's confederate," he said. "Likely a hired hand, paid to assist with the signals and the hound's release. Stapleton's death disrupted the plan, and the beast, untrained without its master, turned on him. The mire finished what the hound began." I showed him the whistle from Stapleton's body, and he nodded. "A signal to control the beast, but without Stapleton's command, it runs wild. We must find its lair before it strikes again." Holmes led us to Merripit House, suspecting the hound was kept nearby. Beryl greeted us, her face pale, her eyes red from weeping. "He's dead," she said, her voice breaking. I tried to stop him, but he loosed the hound last night, thinking to end it. The mire took him. I heard his scream. Holmes's eyes softened, but his tone was firm. "Mrs. Stapleton, you warned us, and for that, you have my gratitude. Where did he keep the hound?" She led us to a shed behind the house, its door ajar, the stench of beast heavy in the air. The chains were broken, confirming the hound's escape, and Holmes found traces of phosphorescent chemical used to create its ghostly glow. "A mastiff bloodhound cross," he said, "bred for size and ferocity. Stapleton used the Moors legend to mask his murders, targeting Sir Henry to claim the estate as a Baskerville heir." I recounted Beryl's warnings, and she confessed fully, her voice trembling. "He was my husband, not my brother. I loved him once, but his greed consumed him. I tried to save Sir Henry, but I feared his wrath. Holmes nodded, his mind already on the hunt. The hound is loose, and Sir Henry is its target. We must draw it out tonight, before it claims another life. We returned to the hall, Holmes outlining a plan. Sir Henry would walk the path to Merripit House at midnight, while Holmes and I lay in wait near the mire. Despite my protests, Sir Henry agreed, his resolve hardened by the deaths. As midnight approached, the fog thickened, and the howl rose close, visceral, its menace a physical force. Sir Henry stepped out, his revolver ready, while Holmes and I took position behind a tor overlooking the mire. Our weapons drawn, the hound emerged from the fog, its massive form glowing with an eerie light, its jaws dripping with saliva. I fired, the shot echoing, but it charged, undeterred. Holmes's aim was true, his bullets striking the beast's chest, and it staggered, a low whine escaping its throat. Sir Henry fired, and the hound collapsed, its eyes dimming in death. The mire's edge, mere feet away. Holmes knelt beside it, his face grim. A monstrous thing, he said, bred for murder. Stapleton's scheme ends here, and the mire has claimed its last. We returned to the hall, barrel safe, the curse broken. Holmes explained the rest. Stapleton's lineage, his use of the Moor's legends, the signals to control the hound. The Confederate's death, he deduced, was a misstep in a plan unravelled by Stapleton's own demise. Sir Henry, shaken but resolute, vowed to restore the hall, and I penned a final report to Holmes, the Moor's secrets laid bare by his genius. Chapter 12. The case concluded. The fog that had long cloaked Baskerville Hall seemed to lift at last, as if the moor itself exhaled in relief at the death of the monstrous hound that had terrorized its wilds. I, Dr. John H. Watson, stood in the great hall, my revolver now resting in its holster. The events of the previous night, the final confrontation with the beast, the death of Jack Stapleton's confederate in the mire's embrace, and Sherlock Holmes's unmasking of the plot text. Vividly in my mind, the curse of the Baskervilles, a shadow that had haunted Sir Henry and his lineage, was broken, yet the hall's ancient walls, with their stern portraits and creaking timbers, still seemed to whisper of secrets only half revealed. Holmes's genius had brought clarity to the chaos, but the aftermath of such terror demanded resolution, and I felt the weight of his charge to observe, to report, to protect, shift, toward closure. The morning dawned with a pale, clear light, the sun piercing the mist to cast long shadows across the moor's rugged expanse. Sir Henry joined me at breakfast, his face weary but resolute, the ordeal of the hound's attack having forged a new determination in him. He spoke of plans to restore the hall, to bring life to its desolate corridors, but his eyes betrayed a lingering fear, as if the moor's menace might yet return. Barrymore and his wife served in silence, their grief for Selden tempered by relief at the hound's demise. Their coerced role in Stapleton's signals, though culpable, had been born of fear, and I sensed their loyalty to Sir Henry was now unshaken. As we finished our meal, Holmes joined us, his lean frame a stark contrast to the hall's heavy grandeur. His eyes, sharp and restless, scanned the room, as if seeking one final clue. "Sir Henry," he said, his voice calm but commanding, "the danger is past, but the moor holds its secrets tightly. We must tie up the loose ends, Beryl Stapleton's fate, the villagers' fears, and the estate's future." Sir Henry nodded, his jaws set. "I owe you my life, Mr. Holmes, and you, Watson." I'll not let this place be my grave, I'll make it a home again. Holmes's faint smile held a trace of approval. A worthy goal. But first, Watson, your observations have been invaluable. Let us review the case, to ensure no shadow remains. We retired to the library, where Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling like the fog we had battled. I recounted the events since. My arrival, the sob in the hall, the signals from the west wing, the watcher on Black Tor, Beryl's warnings, the clues in the stone huts, Selden's death, Stapleton's demise in the gully, and the Confederates' end in the mire. Each thread, once tangled, now wove into a pattern under Holmes's scrutiny. Stapleton was a Baskerville, Holmes began, his voice low and deliberate. A distant cousin, driven by greed, declaimed the estate. He posed as a naturalist, using his knowledge of the moor to orchestrate murder. The hound, a mastiff bloodhound cross, bred for size and ferocity, was his weapon. Its glow from phosphorus a trick to fuel the legend. Sir Charles was his first victim, driven to heart failure by terror. Selden, in Sir Henry's clothes, was a mistake. And Stapleton's own death in the gully, likely fleeing his own beast, was poetic justice. I interjected, recalling the Confederates and the man in the mire. His note suggested he was Stapleton's ally. Holmes nodded. A hired hand, paid to manage the signals and release the hound. His death was an accident. Stapleton's plan unraveled when he perished, leaving the beast without a master. The mire, as merciless as the hound, claimed him. Beryl's role, I noted, remained complex. She warned us, Holmes, at great risk. Was she complicit or merely trapped? Holmes's eyes softened. Beryl, or rather Mrs. Stapleton, was his wife, not his sister. Deception to mask their true relation. She loved him once, but his obsession with the estate turned her against him. Her warnings, slipped to you with such care, were her rebellion, born of conscience and fear. She must be questioned, but I believe her innocent of murder. We resolved to visit Merripit House, to secure Beryl and confirm her story. The journey was a quiet one, the moor's paths now familiar but no less menacing, their bogs gleaming in the pale light. Beryl greeted us, her face pale but composed, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief and sorrow. "It's over," she said, her voice trembling. I tried to stop him, but he was consumed by greed. The hound, he kept it in the shed, trained it to kill. I couldn't bear it. Holmes questioned her gently, drawing out the details. Stapleton's lineage, traced through obscure records. His plan to eliminate Sir Henry, securing the estate. The signals, managed by the Confederate, a vagrant named Carter, hired in Exeter. Beryl had been coerced, threatened with exposure or worse, but her warnings had saved Sir Henry's life. Holmes assured her of protection, suggesting she'll leave the moor for London, where she could start anew. Returning to the hall, we addressed the villagers' fears. Holmes and I visited Grimpen, where the inn was abuzz with rumours of the hounds. Demise, Tregenus, the grizzled farmer, greeted us with cautious relief. The howlings stopped, he said, but the moors still cursed. Will Sir Henry stay? Holmes's response was firm. The curse is broken, Tregenus. The hound was a beast of man's making, and its master is dead. Spread the word, Baskerville Hall will thrive again. Dr. Mortimer, summoned to the hall, confirmed Holmes's findings, his scientific curiosity piqued by the hound's biology. A remarkable specimen, he said, examining the carcass, now stored in an outbuilding. Phosphorus on the muzzle, a diet to enhance its size. Stapleton was a genius in his twisted way. The final thread was the hall itself. Sir Henry, bolstered by Holmes's clarity, outlined plans to drain the bogs, repair the manor, and invite tenants to a grand reopening. Barrymore and his wife, their loyalty proven, pledged to serve him faithfully, their grief for Selden tempered by gratitude. The west wing window, once a portal for signals and intrusions, was sealed. Its scratches a reminder of the plot we had thwarted. As evening fell, Holmes and I sat by the fire, the moor's silence a stark contrast to its former menace. "You've done well, Watson," he said, his pipe glowing in the dim light. "Your reports were the scaffolding of this case, and your courage held the line." I smiled, warmed by his rare praise. "And you, Holmes, your timing was impeccable. But how did you know to come to the moor?" He chuckled, a rare sound. "The case was too intricate for London's armchairs. I arrived incognito, lodging in the stone huts, watching Stapleton's movements. Your clues, the signals, the knife, Beryl's notes guided me to the truth. We departed for London the next day, Sir Henry safe, the hall poised for renewal. I penned a final report detailing the case's resolution, Stapleton's plot, the hound's defeat, Beryl's redemption, and the moor's liberation from its curse. As the train carried us from Dartmoor's wilds, I looked back at the tors, their outlines fading in the mist, and felt a profound relief. The Baskerville curse was no more, its shadows banished by the light of reason. The end.